Welcome back everyone to a new episode of Puzzillo del Sud. Hello everyone, this is your ever more colonial marine Puzzillo reporting for duty today. And right now we're going to take a deep dive into the comprehensive tutorial and full review of Nemesis Retaliation.
Oh my god, wow!
Before we begin, as always, I remind you to subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date with all the content that will be coming out. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell, and if you want to buy the game, there's a special discount code for you on Boardout Store. Nemesis Retaliation is a semi-competitive board game, not semi-cooperative, which is different, for 1 to 5 players, with an estimated playtime of 120 to 180 minutes per game. It has been localized in Italian by Cranio Creations, but I want to give a big thank you to Watcher Games for providing me with the copy so I could make this video for you. With that said, just a few notes before we start the tutorial. So, first thing, the entire video is based on the retail box, so the standard edition, and I chose to avoid Kickstarter or deluxe editions. Stretch goals so that the video can be useful to as many people as possible. Another thing, in the explanation, I changed some terminology compared to the game. For example, I swapped turns with rounds so that we keep the classic setup. Finally, making a tutorial for Retaliation was really a challenge because I changed the way of explaining things compared to how it's done in the manual. Instead of giving you a disconnected overview, I preferred to explain everything within its narrative context so I could tell you what each mechanic is for and what it brings to the game. Finally, I really want to thank you so much for the support you are showing me, and in particular, this video on Nemesis Retaliation is a dream come true for me. For the first Nemesis, I only did a review, but that was at the very beginning of the channel, while for Lockdown, I made both a tutorial and a review. With Retaliation, I tried to raise the bar to show you how the quality of my channel has improved over the years, and since it's one of my favorite games, I really put a lot of passion and love into it. With this long introduction out of the way, I'd say we can start with the tutorial, so let's get on with the explanation. Let's set up a game for 2 players. First, take the 6 base pieces and create the frame as shown, then prepare the Hibernatorium by placing the Hibernatorium not discovered tile. Next, take the Hibernatorium marker and place it on this space with the inactive side up, then repeat the same process with the 3 life support markers. Once a marker has been placed for each sector, it's time for the eggs, so place 5 egg markers in the egg space in the nests. After this, take the 2 anti-aircraft markers, shuffle them face down, and then stack them one on top of the other on this space in the Hibernatorium. Then take the self-destruct marker and place it on this space. Finally, take the round marker and place it on space 1 of the round track, and the landing module marker is placed on space 10 of the round track. Next, take the tray with all the shown components and place it near the frame, then place a universal marker on the top space of the chosen objective area. Then, another universal marker is placed on space 0 of the Queen's Wound track, and now we move on to the tactical device markers, which are placed next to the robot card. As for the ammunition, they must always be facing this side, and then, in the landing zone space, 4 tactical device markers of each type are placed. Once the frame is set up, we take the components shown and place them next to the tray, then gather all the corridors, shuffle them on this side, and put them in the corridor tray. After this, we take all the intruder tokens, separate them by type, and shuffle each stack individually. And make sure to keep each token on this side so that its contents are not revealed. Then, following the indicated diagram, we take this number of tokens and put them in the bag. Then the bag is thoroughly shuffled and set aside. Next, we take all the room tiles, separate them by type, and shuffle each stack individually. Be sure to shuffle each stack face down so that the contents are not visible. Once the stacks are placed near the supply, we move on to the cards. First, we take all the Queen's health cards, shuffle them face down, and place them in this space. Then shuffle all the robot cards face down and draw one at random. Make sure that the drawn card is placed on the robot card space and must not be revealed. So we don't forget, take the robot miniature and place it in the Hibernatorium room. Then, going back to the cards, shuffle the item deck and the serious wound deck separately. Next, shuffle all the displayed decks face down, and as for the contamination cards, this is the correct side. To finish the general setup, take the intruder help sheet and place it near the supply. Be careful, the starting side is the one that says, "The Queen is alive." Once all the intruder miniatures are set up, it's time to prepare the players. First, take the player aid cards according to the number of participants. For example, In a two-player game, only keep cards 1 and 2. Shuffle the remaining cards and assign them randomly to the players present. Once revealed, give the first player token to the player with card number 1. Now take all the objective cards and separate them by type. Then, depending on the number of players, you need to remove some cards from each deck. In a two-player game, remove this card from the private objective deck, and once the decks have been trimmed, shuffle them face down. Once this is done, each player draws one objective card from each of the two decks, and at any time during the game, you can take a peek at their contents. Since the objectives are secret, keep them hidden from the other players. As for the mission task, one card is immediately revealed and placed in this space. Once you're done with the objectives, take all the character selection cards, shuffle them face down, and then, still face down, deal 2 character cards to the player with number 1. After receiving the cards, secretly check their contents, then choose one character to reveal, while the other card remains face down and is shuffled back into the deck. After player 1 has finished, the procedure is repeated for all the remaining players, and as soon as everyone has done this, the rest of the cards are discarded. Next, each participant receives a player board and places their character tile on it, then sets the oxygen counter to 7. Now we take a universal token and place it on this space, and then we gather the remaining components of the character we have chosen. The miniature is placed on the starting space, that is, the landing zone, while the action cards are shuffled face down and placed to the left of your player board. Then you take the character's tool card and reveal it immediately, and if it is a card labeled heavy, it must be placed either in the left hand or the right hand. If the card has ammunition slots, you must place ammunition tokens on them, and then, depending on the number on your help card, you take the card holder backpack with that same number. Once the card holder is set up, all the character choice cards are removed, and now you take the support equipment deck and shuffle it face down. After shuffling thoroughly, 7 cards are revealed, and then, starting with the player who has the highest help card and following in descending order, each player must choose one of the revealed support equipment cards. After everyone has chosen, the remaining cards are removed from the game, and if a player has chosen an armor, it must be placed under the severely wounded slot, and any available slots for tactical devices must be filled immediately. Once the cards are arranged, we take the support equipment deck and place it next to the tools deck, and as a final step, each player must choose 4 tactical devices to place in their tactical belt. For the first game, it is recommended to have 1 tactical device of each type. But of course, if a player wishes, they can have more devices of the same type. Once the devices have been chosen, all players draw 5 cards from their action deck, and at any time during the game, you can always check your action cards again. Action cards must always be kept hidden from the other players, and then 3 corridors are drawn at random and connected to the landing zone. The corridors are placed on the unreinforced side, that is, the one with the numbers on the connections to the landing zone. And if a corridor shows the image of an open hatch, it is placed next to the landing zone. As soon as all participants are ready to play, you can begin. A game of Nemesis Retaliation is divided into rounds. Each round consists of 4 phases, which are listed on the player aid card, and the game ends at the end of the 14th round, or if all characters have escaped, gone into hibernation, or died. The goal of the game is to survive through the various rounds by completing the chosen objective, and if you have contamination cards, you must carry out the infection procedure and, if necessary, the hatching procedure. If the character has survived and fulfilled their objective, then they win the game. And don't be fooled by more cooperative objectives, because in Nemesis Retaliation, one player, everyone or no one can win. Whether the game will be more or less competitive depends on the player's chosen objectives, and for example, with some objective cards, the mission task does not need to be completed. On the other hand, with other objective cards, the mission task must be completed, and remember that the mission task contains information that is already visible from the setup. Now that we've explained how to win, let's take an overview of the base, which is made up of 3 sectors or 3 levels. Each sector is identified by a letter, which can be found on the frame, and when we go to explore the rooms, we will need to take those with the same letter. Additionally, each sector has its own area, and you should imagine a huge rectangle positioned like a column. Another thing is that the placement of rooms and corridors can never go beyond the boundaries of the base frame, and in the example shown, the room is placed correctly, while the corridor is not acceptable. Since the base has been abandoned, all systems have been deactivated, which means that initially you cannot use the robot, you cannot hibernate in the hibernatorium, and unfortunately it is unclear whether the anti-aircraft system is active or not. Finally, even the life support systems unfortunately are not working, and so currently there is no oxygen throughout the entire base. How to reactivate all the supports and systems will be explained later, but one effect that is active right from the start of the game is the landing module. When the round counter reaches the landing module marker, the characters can escape, and it is also possible to escape using the emergency shuttle in Sector C or by hibernating in the hibernatorium. Be careful with the hibernatorium if the self-destruct has been activated, because if it is completed, you will explode along with everything inside the base. Another way to destroy the base is to run out of fire tokens. If at any point during the game you need to place a fire token and there are none left in the supply, then all the characters inside the base are immediately killed, while only those who have escaped with the landing module or the emergency shuttle are saved. To find out which sectors the rooms are in, or to better understand their effects, there is the summary sheet. Having given an overview of the base, let's now talk about the game phases. All players must complete each phase before moving on to the next one. As for the first phase, the player phase, it begins with the player who has the first player token. Be careful not to confuse the number on the help card, as it refers to certain objectives or to the setup. When it is the active player's turn, they must perform 2 actions. The actions, also called basic actions, are described on your player board, and note that even passing is considered an action. If the player performs only 1 action or does not wish to perform any more, then they must take the pass action. In addition to the basic actions, there are actions that do not count toward the 2 action limit per turn. A reaction is triggered when the player meets the specified requirement, while the objective choice can be made by each player only once per game. When a player chooses the objective, they secretly check their cards and then must select one, but remember, both the chosen card and the discarded one must remain face down. In addition, the universal marker is moved down by 1 position, and the player draws as many action cards as the number they have just reached. Remember that each character's action deck is placed to the left of their player board, and if you run out of action cards and need to draw new ones, you take all the cards from the discard pile, which is placed to the right of your player board, and after shuffling them face down, they become the new action deck. Once the deck has been put back in its place, you continue drawing, and after all the cards have been drawn, the objective selection is concluded. Having explained the free actions, let's now look at the basic actions, which are divided on the player board according to the cost to be paid. The cost refers to an action card from our hand that we must place in the discard pile, and this means that to use one of these 2 actions we have to discard 2 cards from our hand. Please note, contamination cards can never be discarded to pay the costs for performing an action, and only the pass action does not require discarding any cards. When a player passes, they may discard any number of contamination cards and/or action cards, and then their turns will be skipped for the rest of this phase. On the other hand, if you want to activate the effect of a card you play, you apply its effect and then discard it, which means that apart from the card itself, nothing else is discarded. Another thing is that some actions can be used in any context, while others can only be used if the character is not in combat. And for both basic actions and played cards, there is a reference icon. If a character is in the same room as an intruder, then they are considered to be in combat, and as long as they are in combat, they cannot perform actions with this icon. Having explained the starting rules, let's look at the basic actions and start with the first action, which is movement. First of all, the player must choose a corridor that has already been placed and is not blocked by a door, so they cannot choose this corridor or this direction. If there are intruders in the starting room and/or in the corridor you want to cross, then you suffer an attack of opportunity. If everything is clear, you simply resolve the movement. We will come back to the attack of opportunity later. For now, let's see what happens if the character moves into an unexplored corridor or into a room that hasn't been discovered yet. If a corridor is connected to 2 rooms that have already been placed, it is considered explored, while a room that has already been placed is considered discovered. At the start of the game, all corridors are unexplored, and when the player completes their movement, they move from one room to another. The golden rule is that player characters can never stay in the corridors, and to determine what the player has found, an exploration card is drawn. The card just drawn is oriented in the same way as indicated by the base frame, and then, depending on the relevant sector, a room tile is drawn. If the room tiles of that letter have run out, then a room with a question mark is drawn, and then the room is revealed and placed under the character who moved. Now, referring to the card, it's time for the corridors and other elements, and just like during setup, corridors are drawn at random. Remember that corridors are placed one at a time with the unreinforced side up, which means the correct side is the one with any number other than 0. If there are any hatch icons, they must always be placed adjacent to the room that has just been explored, and as soon as all the elements have been placed, the entry effect is resolved. Once the effect has been resolved, you need to continue reading the instructions on the card, and then it can be removed or discarded. Normally at the end of a movement, a noise roll is made, which means you take the yellow die and roll it immediately. After rolling the die, you check the value in each corridor connected to the room where the character is located, and if there is no noise token, you immediately place a noise token there. If the number corresponds to a corridor where there are intruders, then the largest one moves into the room. If, on the other hand, the intruder is at a closed door, then it destroys it, which means that door can no longer be closed again. If instead the noise corresponds to a corridor where there is already a noise token, then it is removed and you must draw a token from the bag, and depending on what you draw, there will be different effects. Be careful, because the effects that matter in this case are in the box on the far left, and except for the blank token, all the others are discarded. If, for example, the player draws an adult token, they must immediately reveal it to determine how many adults to place, and the adults are placed in the corridor where the noise was removed. In the case of a drone token, white represents adults and red represents drones, and after the token has been resolved, it is placed at the bottom of its stack. If, on the other hand, the blank token is drawn, then no intruder appears, but 2 adult intruder tokens are taken from the stack and both are placed in the bag. Be sure to also take the blank token and then reshuffle the bag, and as a golden rule, in a corridor there can be either noise or several intruders. Another important rule is that there can be a maximum of 6 intruders in a corridor, and be careful because the queen counts as 4 intruders. The intruders attack the nearest character using the shortest path, and in the case of multiple targets, they attack the one who triggered the effect. If there is still a tie, the turn order breaks the tie, and finally, let's look at the last result, which is danger. When this happens, you always draw a token from the bag, but you resolve the central box, and be careful because in this case the intruder appears directly in the room. Having explained movement and noise rolls, let's now look at the surprise attack, which happens when an intruder is placed or moved into a room for any reason. When any attack is resolved, you immediately draw an attack card, and once the target has been determined, the card is revealed to all players. The card can have different effects depending on which intruder is attacking, and since in this case it's an adult attacking, the character loses 1 health and draws a contamination card. Other cards have the same effect regardless of the type of enemy, while the only special case is represented by the larvae. If as a result of an attack the player receives a contamination card, they place it in their discard pile, whereas if they receive a serious wound, they draw it from the corresponding deck. Serious wounds are placed under your player board from left to right, and until they are removed, they limit the character's health. If there is a cube on one of the blocked spaces, it must be slid to the right so that it is placed in a space without a serious wound. If, as a result of an attack, the player loses health points, then they must continue to move their health cube to the right, and pay attention if the character has armor, as it might absorb the attack. If, as a result of an effect, the marker moves to gravely wounded, then the character loses their armor, and, unfortunately, any tactical devices on it are discarded. If the universal marker reaches the space with the skull, it means the character has been killed, and this means the player removes all their components and is eliminated from the game. If a larva attacks the character, you do not draw any attack card. Instead, you take the larva and place it on the player's board. If the player already has a larva, then this one is discarded, and then, regardless of whether the larva is present, the player gains a contamination card. Other surprise attacks occur during movement, and this happens when there are intruders either in the starting room or in the corridors being crossed. During movement, up to 3 intruders can attack, always starting with the largest ones. Now, let's look at normal movement in an already explored room. Basically, you follow the same rules I explained earlier, except for the exploration sequence, so we place our character directly in the destination room. Regardless of whether there are other characters or intruders, you still perform the noise roll. Now let's look at the last type of movement, which is cautious movement. Unlike basic movement, this costs 2 action cards, and the only difference is that you secure the area. Before making the noise roll, you place a security token, but be careful, you can't secure the area if there's an intruder inside. Security tokens prevent characters from being attacked, which means that when an intruder enters a room, the security token is discarded, but the intruder does not attack. A maximum of 3 security tokens can be placed in a base room, and besides cautious movement, you can use a basic action costing 1 to place a security token. Having explained movement and defense, let's move on to character attacks. Each character has 3 different attacks. The golden rule is that the burst attack can only be performed in an adjacent corridor, while the single shot and melee attacks can only be used in the room where both our character and an intruder are present. To fire a burst, we need to target an adjacent corridor that is not blocked by a door, and we must have a ranged weapon that has ammunition and is not broken. The malfunction token indicates that unfortunately the weapon is broken, but through certain actions or game effects, it is possible to repair it. If the weapon doesn't have even a single ammunition token, then unfortunately it can't fire a burst. But if it has an ammunition token, even if it's partially depleted, then it can fire a burst. If all the conditions are met, then you must pay 1 ammunition token. If this token is partially depleted, it is removed, while if it is fully loaded, it is flipped to the other side. Once you've paid the ammunition, you can roll the purple die, which is the burst die, and the value on the die indicates the number of shots. Each larva and adult is killed with a single assigned shot, while a drone requires 2 shots and cannot be wounded, and the damage to the queen will be explained later. In the example shown, the red player fired down this corridor and got a total of 3, so they can kill either 1 drone and 1 adult, or 2 adults and lose the remaining shot. A result of 4 would have killed all the enemies in that corridor, but watch out for the symbols around the 4, which indicate a special effect. To check what the special effect is, you need to look at the weapon used to attack, and as soon as the special effect has been resolved, all the killed intruders are removed. Having explained the burst fire, let's now move on to the single shot. Unlike the other firing mode, you target 1 intruder in the same room. To perform the attack, the weapon must not be broken and must have an ammo token, but unlike burst fire, you do not spend the ammo token. If all the requirements have been met, then a hit is immediately assigned, so a universal token is placed next to the target. Then you take the red single shot die and roll it, and if the result is equal to or less than the number of hits on that target, then it is killed. In the example shown, unfortunately the intruder is not killed, and the only case in which you always kill is if you get this symbol, which is the critical hit. If the ammunition symbol comes up, you must discard an ammunition token, so the more times you attack an intruder, the higher the chances of killing it. Larvae are a special case because they are always killed with a single shot, and if a wounded intruder moves into a nearby corridor, it fully heals and all tokens are removed. For a melee attack, you must always have an intruder in the same room, but you don't need weapons and you always automatically receive a contamination card. Then, just like with a single shot attack, you assign a hit first and then roll the die. The rules are practically the same except that you ignore this result, but be careful. If the intruder survives, it immediately performs a counterattack. To prevent this attack, you can place a malfunction marker on one of the character's weapons, while if the attack is not prevented, as usual, you draw an attack card. Having explained the various attacks, let's now see how the queen is damaged. Every time she takes hits, you move the marker on her health track. When the marker reaches the final space, it is moved back to 0, and then a queen's health card is immediately revealed. Once the card is revealed, you must discard as many other cards as indicated at the top, and then resolve the effect shown at the bottom. After resolving the entire card, it is also discarded, and so you need to deal another 5 hits to draw a new queen's health card. When all of the queen's health cards have been discarded, the queen is killed, so her miniature is removed and the intruder board is flipped over. On the queen is dead side, the intruder tokens work differently, and now let's look at the next action, which is activating a room. To activate a room, the player must discard 2 cards from their hand and then apply the effect of the room where their character is located. If the room has a malfunction token, unfortunately it cannot be activated, but fortunately there are effects that allow you to carry out repairs. Through card or room effects, it is also possible to extinguish fires, and remember that each room can have at most 1 fire token and 1 malfunction token. If you need to place a malfunction token and unfortunately there are none left, then you place a fire token instead. And if you need to place a fire token and those are also gone, then the base immediately explodes. Among the various effects, it is possible to reactivate life support so that there is oxygen in the sector, and of course, it can also be deactivated to remove the oxygen. Among the various actions, it is also possible to use the little robot in the hibernatorium, and to reveal the hibernatorium, you need to connect one of its corridors. Once the hibernatorium is discovered, this marker is immediately removed and the robot is activated, which means that the covered robot card is revealed. The robot changes from game to game, and the card specifies its effects. It can be activated if the character is in the same room and the player discards a card. The robot can also be activated remotely with the help of computers, so a character must be in a room with the screen icon. To activate the robot remotely, the player must discard a total of 2 cards, but only needs to discard 1 card if they have the data token. Data is collected by a player inside the server room, and in the cooling system room, it is possible to activate the self-destruct sequence. When the self-destruct procedure is activated, you take the self-destruct token and place it 5 spaces ahead of the round tracker. Essentially, there must be 4 empty spaces between the 2 tokens. If unfortunately this is not possible, then the self-destruction occurs at the end of the game. Now let's look at the life support room B to understand what the anti-aircraft is for. When a player controls the anti-aircraft, they immediately take the 2 tokens, secretly peek at their contents, and then put them back in the order they prefer. But be careful, because the token on top will be the one used as a reference. Once the tokens are arranged, the player puts the stack back in its space, and if at the end of the game the anti-aircraft is active, unfortunately it fires at all the shuttles. If a character has escaped with the landing module or the emergency shuttle and the anti-aircraft is active, then unfortunately the transports are blown up and the characters are killed. If the anti-aircraft is inactive, then nothing happens. Having explained the anti-aircraft, let's now look at the hibernatorium, which can be activated or deactivated via life support C. If the hibernatorium is active, a character can enter hibernation and thus leave the game, but unfortunately this cannot be done if there are intruders in the room. If on the other hand there are no intruders, then a noise roll must be made, and only if no intruders appear can you enter hibernation. The same procedure can be carried out in the landing zone if the round marker has reached the landing module marker. And here too, if there are no intruders after the noise roll, the character manages to escape. The last escape method is the shuttle ramp, and here too, if the noise roll is successful and no intruders arrive, the character manages to escape. Among the rooms worth mentioning is certainly the reactor, and once it is activated, it automatically shuts down all life support systems, deactivates any self-destruct sequence, and finally removes the 2 anti-aircraft markers. With the markers removed, the anti-aircraft system will be inactive at the end of the game. And finally, let's look at the last room, which is the nest. The nest cannot be secured and malfunctions cannot occur there. As an action, you can either take or destroy an egg present in the nest. If all the eggs have been taken or destroyed, then the nest is considered destroyed, and an egg is a heavy object that must be carried in one of your 2 hands. Each character can equip only 2 weapons or heavy objects and can have only 1 piece of armor equipped, but to find new items you can perform the search action. Searching is performed in rooms that have these symbols, and each symbol in the room allows you to draw a card from the corresponding deck. After drawing the cards, the player chooses only one, which will go to the character, and any items that are not heavy go into the card-carrying backpack. If you want to use the effect of a tool, there is the Use a Tool action, and tools can also be exchanged using the Exchange Tools action. With the Exchange Tools action, all characters in the same room can exchange tools and/or tactical devices with the person who activated the action, and this person can also act as an intermediary to exchange items between other characters. As the last action, let's look at using the tactical devices that the character possesses, and with this basic action, they can use more than one device. Additionally, if the player wishes, they can reorganize all the tactical devices on their board, moving them from the tactical belt to the item section or vice versa. Ammunition allows you to reload weapons that are empty, while first aid kits let you heal 2 wounds. Oxygen lets you recover 3 units of oxygen, and don't worry, we're about to cover what happens when you run out of oxygen. Finally, by discarding a grenade, you throw it into an adjacent corridor and then assign as many hits as the result of the purple die rolled plus 2. If you roll a 4, unfortunately, no hits are generated. And now let's look at the last effect in the game, which is the command. Commands can only be used with other characters of lower rank, and the ranks are indicated on the character tile present on our player board. In the example shown, the military engineer can give commands to the heavy weapons operator, but unfortunately the opposite cannot happen because that character has a lower rank. Commands force other characters to perform actions or provide bonuses, but watch out for the reactions on the cards as they allow you to defend against these effects. After the active player has performed 2 actions, you need to check Oxygen and Flames to apply their effects, but be careful, because if the player has passed, the consequences do not apply. So if the life support is not active in the sector where the character is located, then they must lose 1 oxygen, updating it on the counter, and if the counter has reached 0, they gain the suffocation condition. If the character continues to lose oxygen while under the suffocation condition, unfortunately they die immediately, and the condition is removed when they recover oxygen or are in a sector with active life support. Once the oxygen has been checked, it's time to check for fire. If the character is in the same room as a fire token, unfortunately, they lose 1 life and the universal marker is moved. After checking for fire, the active player's turn ends and the next player's turn begins in clockwise order. If a player has passed, simply skip their turn. If all players have passed, the first phase ends and the second phase begins immediately, which is the Intruder Phase. Here, each intruder with a fire token receives 1 hit. Then each intruder in the same room as a character performs an attack, and once all attacks have been resolved, the game moves to the third phase, which is the Event Phase. Here, the first player draws a card from the event deck and then must resolve it from top to bottom. The movement of the intruders is indicated by the orientation of the corridor, and only those present will move. This means that this intruder moves while this one stays put. As you can see from the card, the orientation of the corridor is completely horizontal, and then, if the card specifies it, they move from the rooms to the corridors. Once the event card has been resolved and discarded, it's time for the back development phase, which indicates how the aliens are evolving or acting in the shadows. When drawing a token from the bag, we must always refer to the rightmost box, and to add new discs, you take them from the corresponding piles. Once you're done with the bag, the 4th phase begins, which is the reset phase, and the first thing you do is pass the first player token to the next player in a clockwise direction. Then the help cards are flipped back over, so they're ready for the next round, and then each player draws cards until they have 5 cards in hand again. After everyone has drawn, you take the round marker and move it to the next position, and then a new round immediately begins. Among the last things to explain are the infection procedure and the hatching procedure. When an effect refers to the infection procedure, you take all the contamination cards that player has in hand. The cards are placed in the scanner so they can be analyzed, and if the word infected does not appear, you simply discard the cards. If on the other hand the word infected appears, then you must place a larva on the character sheet, and then, as in the other case, the cards are discarded. With the hatching procedure, you must draw 4 cards from your action deck, and this is applied if the character has a larva on their sheet. If among the 4 cards drawn there is not at least 1 contamination card, then these are discarded, whereas if a contamination card is drawn, the character dies. Basically, the miniature is removed and replaced with an adult, and the infection and hatching procedures are also carried out at the end of the game. At the end of the game, each character without a larva must perform the infection procedure, but be careful, as cards are taken both from the action deck and from the discard pile. On the other hand, a character with a larva receives a contamination card and then performs the hatching procedure, and if the character is still alive, they reveal their objective to see if they have won. If the player has completed their objective and survived all threats, then they win the game. And remember, 1, all, or even none of the characters can win. In space, no one can hear you scream. This is the slogan of the very first Nemesis, and it fits well with the second one too. But here things are different because, first, we're not in space, and second, you can hear the cannon fire loud and clear. Finally, and I'd say about time too, we've come to my impressions of Nemesis Retaliation.
Oh my god, wow!
Anyway, before the comment section turns into a massacre, yes, I will do a versus of the entire trilogy, which should come out this week or, at the latest, early next week if I can't make it in time. So we'll postpone the classic question of whether this is the best of the trilogy. Spoiler, yes it is. What I can tell you is that Nemesis Retaliation has become one of my favorite games, and I also appreciated the change in direction compared to its predecessors. Those who criticize the action component as well as the setting should really reconsider their stance. Triple rhyme, wow. Retaliation is based on Aliens, the second chapter of the Alien saga, and here some pissed-off, heavily armed colonial marines are aware of the looming threat. Even in the movie they had been informed, you know? Even though the game is action-packed, you shouldn't underestimate it because dying is incredibly easy, and in fact I found it really tough and winning is extremely rare. Let me take this opportunity to explain something I've been saying since the dawn of the channel. It's not a semi-cooperative game. Depending on the objectives you choose or the choices made by the characters, the game could become more competitive or a bit more cooperative, and in fact, in the end, everyone could win. Only one person could win, or no one at all. Retaliation simplifies and changes a lot of the structure from the previous games, but that doesn't mean it's trivial. In fact, from my point of view, it has modernized it and made it more accessible. And here too, accessible doesn't mean easier to win, it just means that more players can play it. But be careful, it's still a game for experienced players. Since it's inspired by aliens, get ready to shoot a ton at hordes of aliens, but underestimating the situation means dying really badly. Oh, just one thing. I've read around that a lot of people are saying, this Nemesis has turned into zombies. What the hell are you talking about? Yes, there's a lot of shooting, but it still keeps the essence of Nemesis. High mortality, true to the Alien movie saga, semi-competitive if not fully competitive, procedurally generated base, a game that constantly beats us down. Yes, because here, just when things are going well, events get in the way. Honestly, what I appreciated most about this Nemesis is how the mechanics are so closely tied to the setting that inspired it. And here, for example, we could secure the corridors, but we'll always generate some noise, fire in bursts, throw grenades, speed up the arrival of the landing module, or shut down the reactor. Guys, this is aliens.
Just a few moments later.
Once the euphoria dies down, the question is, but is it perfect? Doesn't it have any flaws? No. It does have a few flaws, and now we'll talk about them. First of all, even though the components are always of excellent quality, I still found them inferior compared to the previous editions. And then the manual is very chaotic and not even written that well. Although there is a solo and a cooperative mode, I recommend playing it in the classic mode, which is the semi-competitive one. You understood what semi-competitive means, right? And I also recommend it with at least 3 players, even though it really shines with 4 or 5 participants. With 2 players, it probably either becomes cooperative or everyone just does their own thing. Meh! As for the duration, we're looking at about 2 to 3 hours per game, so that's in line with the rest of the series, and the element of luck is obviously present. Although I have to admit that compared to the previous 2, this one seemed just a bit more manageable to me. Maybe just when it comes to the intruder's health, which you no longer draw for, but now there are hits. The setting is still its strongest point, along with the well-established mechanics and the extremely high replayability given the number of variables. The base is generated differently, the characters are different, there are 10,000 decks to draw from where you get different cards each time, and the interaction is very strong thanks to the new command system. In the game, you can't directly attack another player's character, but there are other ways and tricks to get them killed in a really bad way. Among the last things, I have to say that the new alien race didn't really inspire me, but maybe that's because they needed something more like a horde with a badass queen. Oh, and if you managed to take down the queen, congratulations.
You can do it!
Nemesis Retaliation is an awesome board game that leans a bit more towards action and a bit less towards horror, and if you prefer that aspect, I suggest you go for the first or second installment. On the other hand, if you're looking for better mechanics or overall gameplay, then you can safely go with Retaliation, because while it keeps the spirit of Nemesis, they've tried to do something different. In short, for me it's a real masterpiece that came out of the damn walls. That's it, we've reached the end of the video. Let me know what you think. Did your copy arrive? Did you like the tutorial? Have you tried it? Do you agree with my review? Let me know, leave a comment below. Finally, I remind you to subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated on all the content that will be coming out. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell, and if you want to buy the game, you'll find a special discount code here. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye everyone!